boxing truth here. Juan Manuel Marquez really shouldn't be the one talking about fight negotiations, since he himself has made bad business decisions in the past that stalled his career and affected his career to where he's not really as highly regarded as his Mexican rivals like Barrera and Morales, who became stars much earlier in their careers compared to Juan Manuel Marquez, as Marquez made a bad business decision which halted his stardom, and he had to be in a position where he had to work his way back up and finally achieve the stardom that he craved, that he couldn't get in terms of the popularity of Barrera and Morales much earlier in their careers, in Juan Manuel Marquez's career. He's talking about, Jacobs getting a 25% is ridiculous, percent split is ridiculous, but every fight is different. Every case is, when it comes to negotiations, is different. The bottom line is different when it comes to how much fights can generate. So every case has their numbers. Every fight negotiations has their situations. You really can't compare Canelo Golovkin to Jacobs Golovkin. You can't compare a $50+ million fight, pay-per-view fight, to a regular HBO fight that's probably less than $5 million. Wouldn't generate around more than $5 million. So, you can have your opinion, but then it's kind of, really can't compare those two fights, which is what Marquez is doing when he argued for Triple G in the Canelo negotiations, and also argued for Jacobs in the Golovkin negotiations. But in Marquez's case, he turned down a career-high payday over a decade ago and ended up taking a very small purse to defend his title overseas, to travel all the way over to Indonesia to fight Chris John. Ended up taking an L, lost a decision over in Indonesia for a mere purse of $35,000, when he actually turned down and priced himself out of a Pacquiao rematch after their first fight. The fight fell through. He was offered a guaranteed purse of $750K, and even though it all worked out well for Marquez, he really got a lot of good fortune come his way, because in reality, it shouldn't have went down how it went down. He was able to, after taking the L to Chris John, he was able to fight his way back up the rankings. He was fighting for not much. He wasn't getting the type of purses like Pacquiao was getting after his demolition of Eric Morales. He wasn't getting the type of pay Barrera or the star power Barrera was getting. Wasn't getting those $1 million paydays like Morales, Pacquiao, and Barrera were getting in the mid-2000s because of Marquez's decision not to take the Pacquiao rematch immediately and instead fighting Chris John for $35,000 and end up losing his belt and taking an L and having to work his way back up, fighting contenders to get back into title contention. And then he finally got the fight against Marco Antonio Barrera, a fight that really changed Marquez's career, put him in a better position in the boxing world. Finally got some added recognition. He finally got that big win that eluded him throughout his career at that time. But the thing is, nobody talks about this, is Marquez got one of the biggest gift decisions I've ever seen in that Barrera fight. Barrera whooped his ass. It wasn't even that close. Got the better of him. Marquez had a couple of good rounds where he really put it on Barrera, but overall, Barrera outboxed him, outfought him, outslugged him, outpunched him. Clearly defeated Juan Manuel Marquez. I don't know what the hell those three judges were watching. The three scores were absolutely ridiculous. It seemed like none of those judges even bothered to watch the fight. But Marquez got one of the biggest gift decisions I've ever seen. I watched that fight plenty of times. very recently, this past year, I watched it again, and I had it 8-4 for Marco Antonio Barrera. You couldn't give him less than 8 rounds, in my opinion. You could even argue you can give him 9. And he was also didn't get credit for the knockdown that he scored in that fight. Ended up getting deducted a point for hitting Marquez while he was down, I believe. And that's how fortunate Marquez was from that fight. He got beat in that fight. Clearly got beat. Nobody talks about it because people just don't remember it. And the judges' scorecards were absolutely ridiculous. They scored it unanimously, I believe, in Marquez's favor. And by very wide margins. I believe one judge scored it 117-111 even for Marquez. So it was ridiculous that Marquez's career changed after getting one of the biggest gifts he's ever gotten. People can argue about Marquez Pacquiao's 4 fights all they want, but the argument for all those 4 fights was that pretty much, 3 fights, all 3 of them were very competitive and close. And I felt Pacquiao won 2 of them very clearly. I thought he won the second one. It was close, but I thought he was the clear winner. The third one, I thought it was the most clear victory of the series, besides the knockout in the 4th fight. In the first fight, you could have argued either way. You could have argued for Marquez. You could have argued for Pacquiao. It was that type of a fight because Marquez dominated Pacquiao for much of the first fight after he was almost steamrolled in 1 round. But Marquez's career changed after the Barrera fight. He ended up getting that decision, picking up a strap, and then the rest is history. He ended up getting the Pacquiao rematch for a lot more money than what was initially offered. But my point is that Marquez was the benefit of a very big gift decision against Marco Antonio Barrera. Had he not gotten that decision, Marquez probably would have never gotten the Pacquiao rematch because it wouldn't have been lucrative enough. It's the only reason why it happened. The fight ended up being on pay-per-view. They ended up getting career-high paydays at the time. And they ended up fighting 2 more times thereafter. But if it wasn't for that Barrera win, Marquez wouldn't have been positioned to get any of those fights. So, even though it worked out for him, he had to get a lot of fortune come his way to get put in that position to get those big fights, because Barrera clearly beat him. Barrera got screwed that night. It really should have been him that had his hand raised in victory when they fought back in 08, I believe, or 07. And Barrera's career was never the same after that. Marquez went on to bigger and better things, and Barrera ended up getting the rematch with Pacquiao, but his career as a top fighter thereafter was pretty much over. But that was the fight that he should have gotten that recognition against Marquez. He was the clear winner. He was the better of the 2 fighters between them. And it goes to show you that, styles make fights between elite fighters. Marquez gives Pacquiao fits. Pacquiao gives Barrera fits. And Barrera, I felt, handled Marquez pretty easily. I mean, it wasn't easy, but he did it handily, clearly, much more clearly than Pacquiao's 2 official wins over Marquez in their series. But, in the end, it all worked out for Marquez. Fighting for $35,000, taking the L, losing his belt, having to climb up the rankings, getting a gift decision, and then finally cashing out on big paydays against Pacquiao in 3 subsequent fights after their first one. Also a payday against Barrera. But, it worked out for him. A lot of luck had to do with it. And now he's talking shit about negotiations for a fighter that he really despises, and Canelo. Hates on him because Canelo's a lot more popular and bigger than he ever was. And for him to argue with Jacobs, I don't know. I don't see where that comes from. Gave his opinion on it, but it just doesn't really make much sense considering he's made bad business decisions in the past. Oh well, fuck man, Juan Manuel Marquez. Don't really have much respect for him. Refuses to give Pacquiao the rematch that he gave him 3 times when he didn't have to. Wouldn't fight guys like Provodnikov or Brandon Rios because they were too physical for him. But Pacquiao was willing to fight him. The fight with Provodnikov should have happened had he beaten Algieri. And now Marquez is still contemplating a return. But after 2 years, over 2 years out of the ring, who the hell's he gonna fight? Definitely won't be Pacquiao. I doubt it. Just refuses to give him that fifth fight because he knows what will happen in the fifth fight. Got lucky in that fourth fight. Needed memo shakes to finally buzz Pacquiao when he couldn't do it for 3 fights. Never came close to hurting Pacquiao for 3 fights. Then all of a sudden, memo shakes, a different physique. All of a sudden, he can drop him and put him out. It is what it is. Fuck Juan Manuel Marquez. Could care less if he ever comes back to boxing. This is Boxing Truth. I'm out.